Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm so delighted to have with us today Dr. Fred McKinney. He is the Carlton Highsmith Chair for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the director of the People's United Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Quinnipiac University School of Business, my alma mater. And at Quinnipiac, Dr. McKinney is responsible for teaching entrepreneurship and being a catalyst for entrepreneurship on campus with students, teachers, staff, and the business community. Dr. Fred, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, Simone.
Awesome. Well, you know I'm a Dr. Fred fan. What you don't know, audience, is when I was going to the University of Connecticut, Dr. Fred was my professor, and I never forgot Dr. Fred. He was very impactful to me in the program. So I have followed his career over the years, and he ended up at my alma mater, Quinnipiac University. And so I am a huge fan. So just thrilled that you are here.
Well, glad to be here with you and your guest.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. This show is about being in the driver's seat for your career. And so you have done a number of things. I remember you at the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, and then you went off to Dartmouth, Tuck, for their program, and you've just been all over. I consider you an activist as well, actually, based on what I'm seeing and hearing. And so I want to ask you, when did you know that you were in the driver's seat, that you were in essence responsible for your career?
Well, you know, it's an interesting question, and I have been trained as an academic. So I did an undergraduate degree at UCLA in economics. I came east to Yale to complete a PhD in economics at Yale in 1983. I very easily could have taken a path of becoming just a pure academic, whatever that means. But there was something missing in that academic life that I realized actually when I was working at the University of Connecticut School of Business. It was really my third school. So while I was at Yale, I taught at Sacred Heart University. And that was a way to give me some experience teaching, but also to generate a little income for a broke graduate student. And then after graduating from Yale, I took first job at Brandeis University up in the Boston area, but I continued to live in Connecticut. I spent almost 4 years at Brandeis, and then I came back to Connecticut because I was starting a family. And so family was a key component of my career, and knew that I wanted to be closer to home with my new son. And so I was very fortunate to get an offer from the University of Connecticut at their Stamford campus. And so I spent almost 15 years at the University of Connecticut School of Business. But even there, I knew something was missing. And while at UConn, I had a friend that I had met in graduate school. And he had opened a coffee business, and we started a coffee wholesale company, and it was fun. I mean, I had fun selling and producing and managing a small business. And as I thought about it, that's really where I came from. I've always been in business. I mean, even from the point when I was 10 years old, I had a paper route, and I delivered papers, and it was a business because there was a guy who was like, he would drop the papers off. I'd have to bundle them, unravel them, then deliver them to the different people's houses. It was a business because I had to collect the money and from the people. And so this here, you think about this 10-year-old kid going and knocking on the door to get the weekly paper dues that the person owes. And, you know, you had to be persistent. And so they owed me. And the thing about it was, if I had to pay for those papers. So the guy that dropped the papers off, he had no excuses. He says, give me the money that you owe me for the papers that I delivered to you. So he was like the wholesaler and I was the retailer. And so I only kept what I could collect. And so that you know, instilled a very important lesson for me, but I love that work as well. So I was always an entrepreneur. So the coffee business kind of reintroduced me to entrepreneurial activity. And so I did both. I owned a coffee company and taught full time while at UConn. And then I decided to leave that coffee company and, you know, went back into teaching, did some other things. I actually got a Series 7 financial securities license because I wanted to know what securities dealers were supposed to understand, because I was teaching finance and economics. And I kept saying, what are these guys supposed to know that I don't know? And it turns out they weren't supposed to know too much more than what I knew already. But in any case, I got back into the business. The entrepreneurial bug had bit me. But the next entrepreneurial venture I had was related to that previous coffee experience. I invented a machine that dispensed whole bean coffee in a retail setting. And so that was a pure startup, a pure entrepreneurial venture with venture capital money, with high risk loans from private investors. And we did that for 3 years. We got it off the ground. We made prototypes. We sold them. We went to food shows and grocery store shows, and we sold the machine to several countries around the world, but we ran out of money. And so our loans came due. And I can remember the day that happened, because I went to the grocery store and I was just going to buy some food. And I put my credit card into the machine, and the teller at the grocery store said, your credit card has been rejected. I said, what do you mean my credit card's been rejected? And so the bank, unbeknownst to me, had called my loan. I knew that, you know, we were in discussions, but they had called my loan. And so they froze my account. And so here I was at the grocery store, slightly embarrassed that I couldn't pay for the groceries. And so I went home, and I remember that day, I said, you know what? Some people would say, okay, that's the end. You in effect are bankrupt when the bank calls your loan. And I said, it's not going to end like this. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's not going to end like this. This is not how it's going to end. And so, you know, my partner and I, we paid off all of our debts, which was very important to me, because I knew that I wasn't done, and I didn't want anybody hanging over me saying, well, you didn't pay me, this didn't happen. So I said, we're going to pay everybody back. And that put me in a deep hole, because by this time I had accumulated some assets, but those were assets that, you know, my children to go to college, etc. But I paid back all my loans. I didn't know what I was doing for the first time in my life, because this time I had left UConn. For the first time in my life, I was there and said, I don't have a place to go. And so I said, okay, this is not acceptable. I'm going to do something. I'm not sure what, but I'm going to do something. So I started consulting, and I got a gig in Bridgeport working for the Hall Neighborhood House, helping them develop entrepreneurial center at the Hall Neighborhood House, a nonprofit organization in Bridgeport. And from that, it was interesting. I was doing presentations in Bridgeport for the community-based businesses, and there was a woman from People's Bank. So People's keeps coming into my life. And there was a woman from People's Bank that was in attendance. Beverly Hoppy was her name. And Beverly heard me, and she was a board member of the Connecticut Minority Supplier Development Council. And so she came up to me after my presentation and she said, you know, you really know this small business stuff. Would you be interested in participating? Or we have an opening. The president of the Connecticut Council is announced that they were leaving. We have an opening. Would you be interested in applying? And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so I was familiar with the council because both my coffee business and the equipment business that I created were both certified by the council. So I knew who they were. And I knew the former executive director as well. And so, but I applied. I didn't have high hopes for what it was going to do. And I had an interview, and I thought the interview went well. And lo and behold, they offered me the job as president and CEO of the Connecticut Minority Supplier Development Council, and that was in 2001.
That's
and so,
amazing.
Yeah, so that was that. There were some lessons there. One, you know, there's an internal drive that I had that was not going to accept the setback of going bankrupt, and also I knew I had to get active and got out there. And if I had not gotten active and started working at Hall Neighborhood House, I would have never seen Beverly Hoppy. The position would have never happened. I never have spent 15 years at first the Connecticut Minority Supplier Development Council, and then what became the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council because of an acquisition that I did as president. And so, you know, I think that setback was really important in helping me define that I have to take control of my destiny.
I
Now,
love
you
that
need help,
story.
obviously. So that's kind of when it happened.
That is a great story. And like you said, so many wonderful lessons. And speaking of lessons, let's talk about your formula, because you've gone from academia to entrepreneurship, et cetera. And I wonder, what would you say are the key ingredients for successfully owning your career, Dr. Fred?
Well, that's exactly it. You have to own it. You have to be responsible for it. You need help along the way. And the way to get help, in my view, my personal philosophy is to give help. So you have to give help. You have to say yes. And so I've had a practice of very rarely saying no to a request. So if somebody wants me to help them, I mean, unless there's, you know, something just crazy going on in my life at the time, I'll say yes. I'll try to figure it out. And what happens is you accumulate all of these yeses in your career and your life. Not that you will plan on using them ever, but they're there. And so, you know, sometimes you don't know when you're going to need somebody's help, and you don't know who that person is or group is whose help you might need. But to the extent that you have been open and helpful to other people, it's like karma. And so, you know, if you understand that, you know, there are good deeds that sometimes don't go answered immediately, but they eventually get answered, and maybe not by the person that you expect.
So I wonder, you said say yes to whatever comes your way and not to be afraid to ask for help. How do you ask for help? Can you give our audience some advice on how to, you are very good at building strategic relationships and, you know, strategic career moves as well. Can you give us some advice around how to ask for help and how to nurture relationships? We know we say yes, but tell us a bit more, if you will.
Sure. there, you some to ask someone for help, it must be part of a strategy, if you will. It must be part of something that you're trying to accomplish, and there's something missing in your plan that you need some external assistance. And you have these connections. And when I was president of the council, one of the key goals, one of the key um, activities of the council was to help minority business owners develop their networks. Networks are very important. That's what we're talking about. And you may not know who the person is, or you may not know the person who can help you, but you may know the person who knows the person who can help you. So oftentimes the ask is, can you introduce me to so and so? I think you may know them, or you've mentioned them, or they might be a colleague of yours. And sure enough, people are more than happy to do that. That's a light ask. You're not asking them to do anything. They're just making a connection for you. And then you thank for that, and so that you it's essentially it's almost like a balance sheet. So you now owe that person something. If they call, you say definitely yes, they helped you. You're going to help them. But now you've met the person that you're trying to meet. You make the connection for them of how you got to them through somebody that they are connected to and probably know and respect. So that gives you some immediate legitimacy with this person, and you tell them what you're doing. And usually if you're doing something that is makes sense, even if it's intensely personal, that it might be you're trying to get a job someplace, well, you tell that person what you're doing. You got to be open with that person and direct, and they may or may not be able to help you. But what you've done is you've put it out there, and I think in most cases people can help you if they know what it is you need. So it's being able to articulate what your request is, and so it should be something that is manageable by the person that you are requesting. I have a good friend. I sit on a board of an organization called Empower Yourself, and it's up in Massachusetts, and they work with kids in the middle schools, trying to help them with financial literacy. And their executive director is a good friend, and sometimes he drives me crazy, but I never say no. And what he usually does is he'll couch his request in a way that's almost impossible to say no. He'll write me or call me and says, Dr. Fred, do you have 10 minutes? Well, who doesn't have 10 minutes? And so I said, yeah, I have 2 minutes. Let's talk, Cedric. And so, that's a bite-sized request. So I think that makes a lot of sense sometimes. And again, the other thing is you don't abuse those requests. You don't, if you have a request, that's good, and you resolve that. But you can't, you don't want to be a pest to someone who can help you, because then you are, it becomes sort of abusive. I mean, if they want to help you more than what you've asked, that's on them, and that's great. But you are, again, ultimately responsible for making what you were trying to do happen. So that would be my advice on how do you ask for help. It should be discreet. It should be not something that's done all of the time. And you always have to end with a thank you. I also got into the habit of sending handwritten thank you notes to people who have been helpful. Emails are ubiquitous, but because they're ubiquitous, they also kind of lose their value as something that took some effort on the part of the person saying thank you. So just a simple handwritten thank you to somebody who's helped you is a very positive way to cement those relationships that you're trying to build.
I love that example because, like you said, we can get so accustomed to emails, and the nice nature of a thank you note. I love that you brought that in. What resources can you recommend to those wanting to uh, step up, level up, and own their careers?
Well, I think a professional, we're talking about, it doesn't really matter which profession you're in, but if you consider yourself a professional, then it means that you have to master your field. It means that not only mastering your field, be a leader, you have to master your field and you have to master what's going on around your field. So, you have a lot of folks who are like technically proficient and they are great. You need those folks. But and you can be well paid and have a very successful life being technically proficient. But if you want to be a leader, you've got to be more than just technically proficient. So the answer to your question is you've got to go beyond your field of expertise to develop skills and knowledge that support your level of expertise in other areas. So for instance, I do as an economist, I could spend my life talking about demand and supply, but I don't. I spend my life trying to use these tools to help clients with the problems that they are challenged with. And so I have clients that are in all kinds of industry, whether it be construction or healthcare or human services or just business in general. You have to develop some expertise in these other areas so that you can move, so that you can fully utilize the skills, gifts that you have. And if you do that, you'll find yourself really being in demand at a much higher level of leadership. So my advice is to one, become technically proficient in whatever field you're in. But if you aspire for leadership, you've got to do more. You've got to get connected. You've got to volunteer for activities outside of your area that put you into contact with other leaders who can see that you are not only technically proficient, but that you have a heart that is good and that people want to affiliate with. They want to support the work that you're doing. And so that's what, and I'm fortunate that, that's kind of been my approach.
Love that. Love that whole package. I have to ask Dr. Fred, uh, are you still using histograms? Because I feel like I've been scarred. you know.
No, I am. In fact, I used them today with one of my clients. I had a presentation to one of my clients' boards. And this was a client at Access Health Connecticut and their board of directors. And so my partner and I at BJM Solutions, we were hired to help them understand health disparities in the state of Connecticut. And some of the data analysis that we did, we used histograms.
Oh my gosh. I said to myself, I am never going to use this. I don't get it. Okay. So
I used them today.
Okay. Okay. So can you give us just some highlights on dealing with risk? Because I think you may be able to give some good insights around here. How do you look at risk and develop an appreciation for taking risk in your career? What should we keep in mind?
Well, the risk risk means that there's a chance that it won't work out. There's a chance that it will work out. I think the risk that you take should be calculated. So you should understand to the best of your ability what the real chances of things working out. And, if you're going to do some kind of long shot, you got to understand it's a long shot. And that means the chances are it's not going to work out. But I think you have to take risk. Because if you don't take risks, you're going to look back and say, well, I wish I should have done this or should have done that. And you didn't take the risk. And so, risk taking is important in your careers. And I think, sometimes your inner voice tells you, you got to change. You got to change companies. You got to change locations. You got to change the how you view your career. You have to change maybe even your profession. And so those are risks. But I think you know, but if you believe in yourself, if you believe that you can do these things, and you know that again, you've built up this inventory of yeses over your career, you go out and do them. And so those are the things that we might call risk mitigation. So you got friends. So those friends can be your safety net.
Nice, nice. If you had to entitle your career body of work, the chapter of the book, what would it be?
um, that's a great question. I was actually thinking about this in preparation for this interview, and I kind of think of myself as I don't fit in very well
Mm,
in a lot of categories. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't fit in very well as a traditional academic. I'm not a good traditional academic. My resume is not gonna woo a dean of a college over because of my academic writing and performance. But that's not what I was trying to do. And that was not my life. And I think of myself almost as a public scholar, a social scholar,
mm,
someone who tries to understand the way things work, but not so much for the benefit of the students at a particular university, but or for a particular school, but for society at large. And I think if I have been successful, that's what I hope to have accomplished.
so the social scholar.
Yes.
We will look for that book whenever it comes out. So, Dr. Fred, as we begin to wrap up the interview, can you tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd like to do so?
Certainly, I would suggest that they join me on LinkedIn. And so it's Dr. Fred McKinney on LinkedIn. You can find me there. That's where I'm probably going to be over the next few years. Who knows where I'll be in terms of a job or doing some other things, but that's the best place to reach me is on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And I just had your title, your book title, not that it's my career, popped into my head, Dr. Fred. And I'm going to throw this out there so you can think about this. I feel you are the master of the pivot.
The master of the what?
Pivot, the career pivot.
Oh, okay.
You had to do a major pivot with the credit card decline, the bankruptcy, if you will, and you continue to do major pivots.
Yeah, yeah. You don't let them stop you. You got to keep on, keep on going. So that's
All
the
right.
lesson. Don't let anything stop you. If you've got some goals, you keep going.
All right. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if there are any nuggets about Black history. We're featuring you during Black History Month. So is there anything that you want our audience to know from a Black history standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I am not a trained historian, but I read a lot of history, and I think that Black history is American history, and American history is Black history, and I think that there's so many lessons from our experience in this country and around the world in the diaspora that I draw on and that you can draw on. You don't have to be Black to draw on these lessons of how people overcome struggle. I mean, that's the lesson. How do you overcome the barriers that are placed in front of you to achieve your goals despite the odds? And so that's where you can learn. That's how you can get your inspiration, because you need those things. Because in life and in your career, you're going to get knocked down. It's not that people who are really successful get knocked down. Sometimes they get knocked down a lot, but what distinguishes them, they get back up. So that's where you can learn from that history. And some of that history is personal from your own family. So you can start there and learn the stories, learn the history of your family, learn the history of their struggles, use them as examples to keep you motivated to achieve what you need to achieve, because our ancestors wanted us to be successful. So I believe that that's the lesson I would ask people to take away from Black History Month. Learn from your ancestors.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Fred, it has been such a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And, hopefully this was helpful to your listeners.
Awesome. I know that it was. Thank you, Dr. Fred.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.